The Dakota Territory sunset painted the prairie cemetery in shades of blood and gold, its final rays casting long shadows across weathered gravestones and freshly turned earth. Anna May Thornton's small body trembled despite the lingering warmth of the day. 3 days she had lain beside her grandmother's grave, her once white dress now torn and filthy, her cheek bruised a sickly purple, where a settler's rifle butt had struck her during the raid. At 10 years old, she looked even younger in her exhaustion blonde hair, matted with dirt and dried tears cutting pale tracks through the grime on her hollow cheeks. In her sleep, Anna whimpered her fingers, digging into the soft earth of the grave as if trying to reach the woman buried beneath. Her dreams were filled with blood and fire, her father falling as Lakota arrows pierced his chest when he defended their small spring against desperate warriors. Her mother's cry as a stray bullet from her husband's own gun struck her. And worst of all, her grandmother's final rattling breaths as she shielded Anna with her own body from the settlers' rifles. "I guard my rest until the right protector comes," Standing Deer had whispered, pressing a worn leather journal into Anna's trembling hands before the light faded from her eyes. "Guard this with your life. It contains the path to many futures." Anna had obeyed, digging her grandmother's grave with bleeding fingers when no one else remained to do it, marking it with stones gathered from the nearby creek. For 3 days, she had kept her vigil, refusing to leave, despite hunger that twisted her insides like a knife, and thirst that made her tongue feel like dried leather. She survived on rainwater from puddles and the few edible roots and berries her grandmother had taught her to identify, stubbornly maintaining her post despite the distant howling of coyotes that grew bolder each night. The sound that woke her was different. Deliberate footsteps crushing the dry grass, too heavy to be anything but human. Anna's eyes flew open, her body tensing like a cornered animal, one hand instinctively reaching for the small pocket sewn inside her ragged dress where she kept both the journal and the tattered photograph of her grandmother. A tall shadow fell across the grave, blocking the last crimson rays of sunlight. Standing before her was a Lakota warrior, his face impassive as he surveyed her huddled form. He wore buckskin clothing marked with symbols of battles and honors, the leather darkened with use and age. 2 eagle feathers were tied into his long black hair, the mark of proven courage among his people. His face bore the lines of a man who had seen perhaps 30 winters, his eyes unusually dark, almost black and watchful beneath a strong brow. One hand rested near the hunting knife at his belt, a precaution born of constant vigilance in contested territory. For a long moment, neither spoke, the only sound, the whisper of prairie wind through the scattered gravestones, and the distant mournful cry of a nighthawk. Anna remained perfectly still, her blue eyes, so clearly inherited from her white father, locked on the warrior's face. She had been taught to fear the Lakota by her father, yet her mother and grandmother had shown her another truth. This man could kill her with a single stroke of his knife, but fear had been used up during the long days of loss and grief. All that remained was exhaustion and a strange, fatalistic calm. "Are you going to kill me?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible from thirst, yet steady with the quiet resignation of a child who had already seen too much death to fear it any longer. The warrior's expression shifted slightly, surprised perhaps at her directness or at her use of English with only the slightest accent of one who had grown up hearing 2 languages. "No," he replied in careful English. "I am Chaska Redhawk of the Oglala Lakota." His gaze fell to the grave she guarded so fiercely, then back to her face, studying her features with newfound interest. "You are mixed blood, Lakota and white." It wasn't a question, but Anna nodded anyway. "My father was a white settler. My mother was Lakota, daughter of Standing Deer." She gestured to the grave. "My grandmother." Something flickered in Chaska's eyes at the name recognition, and something deeper. "Standing Deer," he repeated softly, The healer. Anna's posture changed subtly, alertness replacing resignation. You knew her. She saved my life. Chaska replied, his hand unconsciously moving to his left side, where a puckered scar lay hidden beneath his buckskin shirt. 5 winters passed when a cavalry officer's bullet left me with a festering wound that should have killed me. For 3 weeks she tended me in secret, using poultices and teas to draw out the poison. A glimmer of pride crossed Anna's dirty face. Grandmother helped many people, white and Lakota both, and died for it. Chaska asked, nodding toward the fresh grave. Anna's expression hardened. Killed by white settlers 3 days ago. They called her a traitor to her people for helping whites. Her voice caught slightly. And for having a half-white granddaughter. Chaska knelt to examine the grave, his movements deliberate and respectful. The mound was uneven, the work clearly done by small hands, but a circle of smooth river stones had been carefully placed around its perimeter. A traditional Lakota grave marking that showed Standing Deer's teachings had not been lost on her granddaughter. You dug this yourself? Anna nodded, chin lifted with quiet pride despite her exhaustion. And you have stayed here for 3 days. He asked, genuine respect coloring his voice. Alone, I promised. She replied simply, as though that explained everything. Her hand moved to the hidden pocket in her dress, checking that the journal remained secure. Grandmother said I must guard her rest until the right protector comes. Before Chaska could respond, his head suddenly jerked up, eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. The sun had nearly disappeared now, leaving only a bloody smear across the western sky. But his keen vision caught movement in the gathering dusk. Riders coming, he said tersely, rising to his feet in one fluid motion. 5, maybe 6, moving with purpose. Anna's heart began to pound, a jolt of fresh fear cutting through her exhaustion. Bounty hunters. She whispered, terror washing over her face. They've been looking for me. Bounty hunters. Chaska's hand moved instinctively to his knife. Why would they hunt a child? Because of what I am. Anna replied, her young voice carrying the weight of bitter understanding beyond her years. Half Lakota, half white. Thomas Dakota wants all children like me gone. Dakota Devil. Chaska's expression hardened at the name many tribes gave the notorious land baron. The man who buys land with blood. He sends men to hunt mixed-blood orphans. Anna explained urgently, scrambling to her feet, despite the weakness of her hunger-ravaged body. We might have claims to land through both white and Indian parents. It complicates his business. She clutched at Chaska's arm, suddenly her small fingers surprisingly strong. Please, I can't be caught. Grandmother's journal has names, maps, safe places for children like me. If Dakota Devil finds it, many will die. Chaska finished grimly, understanding immediately. He had heard whispers of such a network among his people, a secret path by which mixed-blood children escaped the violence of the frontier for safer places in the East. Standing Deer's involvement explained much about her reputation as both healer and outcast. The distant thunder of approaching hooves grew louder. They had perhaps minutes before the riders would reach the cemetery. Chaska made his decision instantly. We leave. Now. He extended his hand. Standing Deer saved my life once. I will not let her granddaughter face these hunters alone. For a heartbeat, Anna hesitated, torn between her promise to guard the grave and her grandmother's deeper mission contained within the journal. Then she slipped her hand into Chaska's larger one, her fingers cold, despite the evening warmth. I'm sorry, grandmother, she whispered to the grave. I'll come back when I can. Chaska led her quickly toward the western edge of the cemetery, where a low stone wall separated the consecrated ground from the open prairie beyond. His experienced eyes had already marked their best escape route, a dry creek bed, a quarter-mile distant, offering both cover and a pathway toward the more substantial woodland that bordered the Platte River several miles south. They had barely reached the wall when a shout carried across the cemetery, followed by the distinctive crack of a rifle. The bullet struck a headstone near Anna's shoulder, sending marble chips flying. Chaska reacted instantly, pulling her behind a large monument, his body shielding hers from further fire. "Stay low," he ordered, his voice calm despite the danger. The riders had spotted them, their shouts carrying clearly in the evening air. "There they are, the Injun and the half-breed. Don't let them get away." Another shot cracked through the cemetery, closer this time. Chaska glanced around the monument, quickly assessing their options. The cemetery covered about 2 acres with a stone wall surrounding it, offering minimal protection. To the east lay open prairie, providing no cover for over a mile. Their only viable escape route was westward toward the creek bed and eventual woodland. Through the gathering dusk, Chaska could now make out their pursuers. Clearly 5 men on horseback, spreading out to encircle the cemetery. Their leader was distinctive, even at a distance, a tall figure with a pronounced limp, who carried himself with military bearing despite his obvious disability. Unlike his companions, who wore the typical garb of frontier toughs, this man's clothing suggested a former cavalryman, right down to the distinctive wide-brimmed hat, tilted at a precise angle. "Silas Cain," Chaska muttered, recognizing the notorious bounty hunter, even in the fading light. "You know him," Anna whispered, pressing herself tighter against the monument as another bullet struck nearby. "Every Lakota warrior knows Limper Cain," Chaska replied grimly. "Former cavalry sergeant. Lost his leg at the knee during a raid on a Cheyenne village 4 summers ago. Now he hunts Indians for Dakota Devil and anyone else who pays." His expression darkened. "He has personal reason to hate me. Why, I was the one who shot him during that raid." Anna's eyes widened, understanding the implications immediately. This wasn't just any pursuit. It was personal vendetta combined with mercenary purpose. The most dangerous kind. "When I say run head for that tall angel statue," Chaska instructed, pointing to a stone angel with outstretched wings about 20 yards away. "Stay low, move fast." Anna nodded, her face pale but determined. Chaska counted silently, watching the pattern of shots. 2 more rang out in quick succession, and then a pause as at least one rider reloaded. Now, they broke cover together, sprinting toward the angel monument. Anna's limp was immediately evident, her right leg dragging slightly from an injury sustained during the settlers' raid. Still, she moved with surprising speed, for a half-starved child, desperation lending strength to her exhausted limbs. They reached the stone angel just as another volley of shots peppered the gravestones around them. From this new position, Chaska could see Cain directing his men with the precision of a military commander, 2 flanking left, 2 right, closing the noose around their quarry. "They're trying to cut us off from the creek," he murmured. "We need to move faster, take a different route." He studied Anna's pale face, noting the fever brightness of her eyes and the way she favored her injured leg. "Can you run?" "Yes," she insisted, though the trembling of her small body belied her confident words. Chaska made another swift decision. "I'll carry you. It will be faster." Before she could protest, he hoisted her onto his back. "Hold tight." Anna wrapped her arms around his neck, her weight barely noticeable to the powerful warrior. Chaska moved with the silent grace that had made him renowned among his people, using the gravestones as cover as he worked his way toward the western wall of the cemetery. The hunters had dismounted now, advancing on foot with methodical precision. These were not common thugs, but experienced trackers who knew their business. Cain's voice carried clearly in the still evening air, his orders precise and confident. "Jenkins circle north. Cooper take the south edge. Williams and Decker close in from the east. They're heading for the wall. Don't let them reach those trees." Chaska and Anna had nearly reached the cemetery wall when disaster struck. Anna's grip on Chaska's neck slipped as a coughing fit overtook her, the sound impossibly loud in the tense silence. One of the hunters, a heavy-set man with a bushy red beard, immediately swung in their direction, pistol raised. Over there. The shot narrowly missed Chaska's head as he ducked behind a family crypt. Anna buried her face against his shoulder, struggling to suppress her coughing. "I'm sorry," she gasped between spasms. "Not your fault." Chaska assured her, his mind racing through diminishing options. They were pinned down now, with hunters converging on their position and the wall still 15 yards away across open ground. In that moment of desperate calculation, Chaska noticed something he had overlooked: a small drainage ditch running alongside the cemetery wall, overgrown with tall grass that might provide cover for at least part of their escape route. "Listen carefully," he whispered to Anna. "When I move, slide down and crawl through that ditch while I draw their fire. Stay in the ditch until you reach the wall, then wait for me." "No," Anna protested. "I won't leave you." "You must," Chaska insisted. "The journal is what matters most, your grandmother's legacy. I can move faster alone, join you at the wall." He held her gaze steadily. "Trust me as Standing Deer did." The mention of her grandmother seemed to reach Anna in a way nothing else could have. She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Chaska positioned her at the edge of their cover, indicating exactly where she should crawl. Then, with a deep breath, he broke from concealment in the opposite direction, deliberately exposing himself to draw the hunter's attention. It worked perfectly. All 5 men immediately focused on the running warrior, their shots kicking up dirt at his heels as he zigzagged between gravestones. None noticed the small form of Anna slithering through the drainage ditch, her movements concealed by the tall grass and the gathering darkness. Chaska led the hunters on a weaving chase through the cemetery, doubling back and changing direction unpredictably. A bullet grazed his upper arm, drawing a thin line of blood, but he ignored the sting, focused entirely on giving Anna time to reach the wall. Cain's voice cut through the chaos, his military training evident in his commanding tone. "He's drawing us off, check the perimeter." Too late, Chaska realized the bounty hunter had seen through their strategy. He changed direction abruptly, sprinting toward the wall, where Anna should be waiting, knowing he had only seconds before the hunters would spot her. As he neared the wall, he caught a glimpse of Anna's pale face peering over the stones, her eyes wide with fear. As one of the hunters, Jenkins, the red-bearded man, turned in her direction. In that critical moment, Chaska employed a hunting trick he had learned as a boy. He removed his knife sheath from his belt and threw it hard against a distant headstone, creating a sharp sound that drew Jenkins's attention momentarily away from Anna's position. In that brief window, Chaska closed the distance to the wall, vaulting over it in one powerful movement, and pulling Anna after him just as Jenkins realized his mistake and redirected his fire. Bullets struck the wall where they had been moments before, sending stone fragments flying. "Run," Chaska ordered, pushing Anna ahead of him toward the distant creek bed. "Don't look back." They sprinted across the open ground, knowing that each step exposed them to the hunters' rifles. Behind them, shouts and curses filled the air as Cain organized his men for mounted pursuit. "I can't go back for the horses now," one of the men yelled. "They're heading for the creek. I want them alive, if possible." Cain's voice replied, cold and precise. "Especially the girl. Dakota Devil pays extra for living merchandise." The casual cruelty of the words lent new speed to Chaska's stride. These men viewed Anna not as a child, but as cargo to be delivered for profit. He would die before allowing that to happen. The creek bed appeared before them, a dry scar, cutting through the prairie, its banks lined with scrubby vegetation and the occasional stunted cottonwood. It offered better concealment than the open ground, but also limited their movements to its winding course. As they slid down the steep bank, Chaska could hear the thunder of approaching hooves. The hunters had remounted and were closing fast. "This way," he directed, turning northward along the creek instead of south toward the distant woodland. They'll expect us to go south. We'll double back later." Anna followed without question, her trust in him now complete. They moved as quickly as her condition allowed, staying low and using the creek bank for cover. The sound of horses grew fainter as their misdirection worked temporarily at least. Cain was too experienced a tracker to be fooled for long. When they had gone perhaps half a mile, Chaska found what he was looking for, a deep undercut in the bank, where spring floods had carved out a small hollow beneath the tangled roots of a cottonwood. It wasn't much of a hiding place, but it might conceal them long enough to let the initial pursuit pass by. "In here," he directed, helping Anna into the hollow. "Rest while you can." The child collapsed gratefully into the small space, her reserves of strength finally exhausted. Chaska wedged himself beside her, his keen ears alert for any sound of pursuit. For several minutes, they waited in silence, broken only by Anna's labored breathing. The fever Chaska had noted earlier seemed to be worsening, her skin hot to the touch, her eyes too bright in the gathering darkness. "I need water," she whispered finally, her voice cracking with thirst. Chaska nodded grimly. 3 days beside a grave with minimal water and food had left the child dangerously dehydrated, a condition exacerbated by her developing fever. They needed to find water soon, but first they needed to put more distance between themselves and their pursuers. "We'll move again when the moon rises," he said, calculating that they had perhaps an hour before the slim crescent moon would provide enough light to navigate. "There will be water further downstream where the creek bends sharply. Even in drought, some remains beneath the surface." Anna nodded, accepting his judgment without question. Despite her exhaustion, she remained alert, her eyes studying Chaska's face in the dim light, as if memorizing his features. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "Just because my grandmother saved you once." The question caught Chaska off guard with its directness. "A life for a life," he replied after a moment. "This is the Lakota way. There's more," Anna pressed, showing perception beyond her years. "You looked at me strangely when I mentioned standing deer, like you knew something I don't." Chaska hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. There had been something familiar about the child from the moment he first saw her. Something in the set of her jaw, the curve of her cheekbones beneath the dirt and bruising. But such speculation was dangerous, without proof. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," he said finally. "Respected and feared among many tribes for her healing gifts. Some said she could see the path of a person's life in their eyes." He touched the small medicine pouch at his belt, a gift from Standing Deer after she had saved him. "She told me once that our paths would cross again in a way neither of us expected." Anna's hand moved to a spot on her dress collar, where an intricate beadwork pattern was partially visible beneath the torn fabric. She fingered it absently, a habit that seemed deeply ingrained. "Grandmother made this," she said softly. "Said it would protect me, that it marked me as belonging to her family." Chaska's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied the beadwork, something tugging at his memory. The pattern was distinctive, a variation of the medicine wheel design used by many Plains tribes, but with subtle differences that nagged at his awareness like a half-remembered dream. Before he could pursue the thought further, the distinctive sound of hounds baying in the distance broke the silence. Cain had brought dogs, a complication Chaska had feared but hoped to avoid. "They'll track our scent," he explained quietly to Anna, whose face had gone even paler at the sound. "We must move now, find water to break the trail." Despite her exhaustion, Anna struggled to her feet without complaint. "I'm ready." Chaska helped her climb out of the hollow, supporting her when she swayed with weakness. The moon was just rising, providing barely enough light to navigate the uneven creek bed. They moved southward, now retracing their steps and then continuing beyond their original entry point. It was a risk Cain might anticipate such a maneuver, but their need for water overrode other concerns. The baying of the hounds grew gradually louder as they moved through the darkness, the animals following their scent with unerring accuracy. Anna stumbled frequently, her strength failing despite her iron will. After the third fall, Chaska lifted her into his arms without comment, carrying her small form as if she weighed nothing. "I'm slowing you down," she murmured against his chest, shame evident in her voice. "We travel together or not at all," Chaska replied firmly. Standing Deer would expect no less. They had gone perhaps 2 miles when the creek bed widened slightly, the ground beneath their feet changing from dry dust to damp sand. Chaska set Anna down gently on a flat rock while he searched the area, his experienced eyes finding what others might miss, a slight depression where the creek made a sharp bend and the soil darker with moisture. Using his knife, he dug quickly into the damp earth. Within minutes, his efforts revealed a small seep of water that gradually filled the hole he had made. The water was cloudy with silt, but drinkable, a life-saving find in the drought-stricken landscape. Anna drank gratefully when he brought her a handful of the precious liquid, her parched throat working convulsively to swallow. Chaska allowed her small sips, at first knowing that too much water too quickly could make her sick after prolonged dehydration. While she drank, he gathered specific plants he recognized from Standing Deer's teachings years before: willow bark for fever, yarrow leaves to treat wounds and prevent infection, echinacea root to strengthen the body's fight against illness. Each plant was a gift from the earth that might help the child survive until they could reach true safety. "These will help your fever," he explained, crushing the willow bark between 2 stones and mixing it with a small amount of water. "It's bitter, but will give you strength." Anna grimaced at the taste, but swallowed obediently, trusting his knowledge without question. As she drank, Chaska studied their surroundings, planning their next move. The hounds' baying had grown alarmingly close. They had perhaps 15 minutes before the dogs would reach this spot. "We need to mask our scent," he said, gathering his medicines and helping Anna to her feet. "The water here isn't deep enough. We must find a larger pool." They continued downstream, moving as quickly as Anna's condition allowed. The creek bed was changing subtly, widening its banks, growing less steep as they approached the junction with a larger waterway. Vegetation grew thicker here, suggesting more consistent moisture beneath the surface. After another half-mile, they found what Chaska sought: a spring-fed pool, perhaps waist-deep at its center, the water relatively clear despite the drought. Such natural springs were rare treasures in the harsh Dakota landscape, often known only to native inhabitants, who passed the knowledge from generation to generation. "We'll wade through," Chaska explained, lifting Anna once more. "The water will wash away our scent, confuse the dogs." He carried her into the cool water, moving carefully to avoid unnecessary splashing that might be heard by their pursuers. The water seemed to revive Anna somewhat, her eyes growing clearer as the shock of it cut through her fever. "My father brought me to a spring like this once," she said suddenly as they reached the middle of the pool. "Before the troubles started, he and my mother were still happy then." A shadow crossed her face. That was before the drought, before the fighting over water rights. Chaska nodded, understanding. The drought had intensified conflicts that had simmered for generations, turning disagreements into bloodshed as both settlers and tribes fought over dwindling resources. "Your father, he was a good man?" he asked, curious about the white settler who had married a Lakota woman against all social conventions of both peoples. "He tried to be," Anna replied thoughtfully. "He believed in his government papers that said the land was his to farm. But he respected my mother's people too in his way. When the other settlers shunned us because of my mother, he stood firm." Her voice faltered. "He died defending our spring when Lakota warriors came demanding access. 2 warriors died before him. And your mother, caught by a stray bullet from my father's gun while trying to stop the fighting." Anna's voice was flat now, emotionless in the way of children who have seen too much horror to process it normally. "I was hiding in the root cellar. I heard it all." Chaska felt a deep sorrow at this recounting. So much needless death. Good people on both sides, caught in conflicts not of their own making. It was a story repeated countless times across the frontier, with mixed-blood children like Anna bearing the heaviest burden of all, rejected by both worlds, belonging fully to neither. They reached the far side of the pool where Chaska helped Anna up the bank before following. Both were soaked to the skin, but the summer night was warm enough that hypothermia wasn't an immediate concern. More pressing was the need to find shelter before the hunters caught up to them. "The dogs will lose our trail at the water," Chaska explained. "But Cain knows these tricks. He'll search both upstream and downstream." He scanned their surroundings, making a quick decision. "We'll head west now, away from the creek. There are badlands a few miles distant, maze-like terrain where we can hide our trail completely." Anna nodded, her trust in his judgment absolute. Despite the willow bark medicine and the brief rest, she was clearly failing her steps, increasingly unsteady, her skin alternating between burning hot and alarmingly cool. The fever was taking firm hold now, a potentially deadly threat, even without the human hunters on their trail. Chaska lifted her once more, settling her small form against his chest as he set off westward across the open prairie. The moon provided just enough light to navigate, but also made them more visible to anyone searching the landscape. It was a calculated risk speed now versus concealment. With Anna's deteriorating condition, Chaska chose speed. They had covered perhaps a mile. When the baying of hounds resumed behind them, Cain's dogs had found their scent again, likely where they had emerged from the pool. The sound lent new urgency to their flight, Chaska pushing himself to a pace that ate up the ground, despite the burden he carried. Anna drifted in and out of consciousness as they traveled, occasionally murmuring fragments of songs or prayers in a mixture of English and Lakota. During one such period of semi-lucidity, she clutched suddenly at Chaska's shirt, her eyes wide and unfocused. "Grandmother is watching," she whispered. "She said to tell you. The eagle's feather returns to the nest." Chaska nearly stumbled at these words, a cold shock running through him. "What did you say?" he asked sharply. "The eagle's feather returns to the nest." Anna repeated, her voice dreamy and distant. "That's what she said to tell the hawk who watches." The hawk who watches it was the private name Standing Deer had given him during the time she had healed him, a name known only to the two of them, referring to his tendency to observe everything silently before acting. And "the eagle's feather returns to the nest" was a phrase from an old Lakota story about separated family members finding each other again. Chaska's mind raced with implications. Was this fever dream merely coincidence, the child's subconscious mixing fragments of stories her grandmother might have told her? Or was it something more, a message deliberately planted by Standing Deer to be triggered at the right moment? Before he could pursue this line of thought, a new sound reached his ears, not the baying of hounds, but the softer, more immediate sound of padded paws moving stealthily through the grass nearby. One of the dogs had gotten ahead of the main hunting party, perhaps following a fresher scent trail. Chaska set Anna down quickly behind a large rock, the only available cover in the open grassland, and turned to face the threat, drawing his hunting knife. Within seconds, a large bloodhound burst from the taller grass 20 yards away, its eyes gleaming in the moonlight as it fixed on them with single-minded purpose. Behind it came a second dog, then a third, the advanced scouts of Cain's pack. The lead hound charged without hesitation, covering the ground between them with terrifying speed. Chaska braced himself knife-ready, knowing he couldn't retreat without exposing Anna to the attack. The collision came with brutal force, 80 pounds of muscle and bone, driving into Chaska's legs as the dog lunged for his throat. He twisted aside, the powerful jaws snapping closed inches from his face, then drove his knife into the animal's shoulder. The hound yelped in pain, but didn't release its hold, its teeth now sunk deep into Chaska's forearm, where he had blocked its second lunge. With his free hand, Chaska seized the dog's throat, squeezing with merciless strength, until the animal released its grip with a strangled whimper. He maintained his hold, eyes locked with the struggling beast as it fought for air. I take no pleasure in this, Chaska murmured to the dog, but you give me no choice. Only when the animal went limp did he release it, knowing it would not rise again. The other two hounds hesitated at the fate of their packmate circling warily just beyond knife range. Chaska used the moment to assess his injury, deep puncture wounds in his forearm, where the dog's teeth had torn through skin and muscle. The wounds bled freely, weakening him with each passing minute. Anna had remained perfectly still behind the rock during the attack, following Chaska's earlier instruction not to move, no matter what happened. Now she gasped at the sight of his bleeding arm. "You're hurt," she whispered, her fevered eyes wide with concern. "It is nothing," Chaska replied automatically, though the pain was considerable and the danger of infection significant. But where one dog has gone, others will follow. We must move now. He tore a strip from his buckskin shirt to bind the wound hastily, then reached to lift Anna once more. As he did so, his gaze fell upon the beadwork pattern at her collar, more fully visible now that water had plastered her dress against her small frame. Not just any beadwork, but a pattern he recognized with sudden stunning clarity, the medicine wheel design specific to his own band of the Oglala Lakota. More specifically, a variant used only by his father's direct bloodline, the family of Eagle Flies High, a respected elder who had died when Chaska was a young man. Chaska froze his hand, hovering in midair as he stared at the beadwork. "Your dress," he said slowly, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. "That pattern, where did it come from?" Anna's fingers traced the beading with familiar ease. "Grandmother made it," she replied simply. "She sewed it into all my clothes. Said it would protect me, that it marked me as belonging to her family." Her family. Chaska repeated, pieces falling into place with stunning clarity. "Anna, this pattern belongs only to my father's bloodline. Only those descended from Eagle Flies High use this specific arrangement." Understanding dawned slowly on Anna's fever-bright face. "What are you saying?" "Standing Deer must have been my father's sister," Chaska said, the revelation striking him with physical force. "She left our band before I was born, married outside the tribe. It was rarely spoken of." He looked at Anna with new eyes, not just a child he had sworn to protect, but his own blood. "You are my cousin." The moment of recognition hung between them, like a tangible thing, profound in its implications. Then the baying of the remaining hounds shattered the silence, joined now by shouts and the thunder of approaching horses. Cain and his men had caught up to the advanced dogs. "We'll speak more of this later," Chaska said, forcing himself to focus on survival rather than the staggering discovery. "Now we must run." He lifted Anna, ignoring the fresh pain from his wounded arm, and set off toward the badlands, now visible as dark shadows against the horizon. The knowledge that this child was his kin, his family, lent new urgency to their flight. This was no longer just about honoring a debt to Standing Deer, but about protecting the last surviving member of his own bloodline. They had gone perhaps half a mile when the first riders appeared behind them, dark silhouettes against the night sky, moving with the relentless purpose of men who killed for money. A shot rang out, the bullet passing overhead with a distinctive whine. A warning not amiss. Cain wanted them alive. "Na halt, Injun." The commander's voice carried clearly across the prairie. "There's nowhere to run. Surrender the girl and you can go free." Chaska didn't waste breath responding to the obvious lie. Cain would never let him walk away, not after what had happened during the Cheyenne village raid years before. This was about vengeance as much as bounty. The badlands loomed closer now, a maze of eroded ravines, hoodoos, and knife-edged ridges carved by ancient waters into a nightmare landscape that could swallow entire hunting parties. It was dangerous terrain, especially at night, but it offered their only hope of escaping mounted pursuers. Just as they reached the first outlying formations, fantastic spires of eroded stone that rose from the prairie like the fingers of some buried giant, another sound reached them, one that turned Chaska's blood to ice. The unmistakable crackle of spreading fire. He turned to look back the way they had come, and saw an orange glow illuminating the night sky behind them. Cain had employed the oldest trick in the frontier book, setting fire to the dry grass to flush out quarry that couldn't be easily tracked. "They've set fire to the prairie," he said grimly, understanding the bounty hunter's strategy at once. The drought-parched grassland would burn with terrifying speed, creating a wall of flame that would drive any living thing before it, or consume those too slow to escape. Anna's face paled in the moonlight. "We're trapped between them and the fire." "No," Chaska corrected firmly. "We are challenged. There is a difference." He scanned their surroundings, seeking any advantage the terrain might offer. "The fire will drive the game before it watch for snakes and other dangers as we move." They entered the badlands at a point where a dry wash cut between two towering stone formations, creating a natural pathway into the maze beyond. The footing was treacherous, loose shale that shifted unpredictably beneath their feet, threatening to send them tumbling into unseen crevices. Chaska moved carefully despite their need for speed, knowing that a broken leg in this terrain would mean death for them both. Behind them, the fire advanced with frightening rapidity, driven by a steady wind from the east. Smoke began to fill the air, making breathing difficult and bringing tears to their eyes. Anna's coughing returned with renewed force, each spasm racking her small frame. The narrow wash opened suddenly into a broader canyon, where several drainage channels converged. Multiple pathways offered themselves, some leading deeper into the badlands, others doubling back toward the burning prairie. Chaska paused, evaluating their options in the red-tinged light cast by the approaching fire. "Which way?" Anna asked weakly, her voice nearly lost in a fit of coughing. Before Chaska could answer, the distinctive sound of sliding shale came from the wash behind them. Someone was following their trail, moving with the confidence of experience, despite the difficult terrain. A moment later, a voice called out, cold, precise, and all too familiar. "I know you're there." Chaska Red Hawk. Silas Cain's voice echoed off the canyon walls. "Did you think I wouldn't recognize you? The warrior who took my leg and left me to die?" Anna looked up at Chaska with wide eyes. "He knows you. We have history." Chaska replied grimly, setting Anna down behind a large boulder while he considered their diminishing options. The fire blocked retreat to the east. Cain approached from the south, and unfamiliar territory lay to the north and west, possibly containing dead ends that would trap them completely. "I've dreamed of this moment." Cain continued, his voice growing closer. "Dakota Devil wants the girl alive, but he never specified what condition you should be in." A harsh laugh echoed through the canyon. "I owe you for this leg, Injun. Tonight I collect with interest." Anna tugged urgently at Chaska's sleeve. "There," she whispered, pointing to a narrow crack in the canyon wall that would have been nearly invisible in the shifting shadows, if not for her sharp eyes. A hiding place. Chaska assessed the opening quickly, barely wide enough for Anna to squeeze through, certainly too narrow for an adult man. It might offer temporary sanctuary for the child, but would leave him exposed to Cain's vengeance. A plan formed in his mind, desperate but their only chance. "Listen carefully," he whispered, kneeling to meet Anna's fever-bright gaze. "I'll lead Cain away deeper into the badlands. You hide in that crack until morning, then follow the rising sun eastward. Once past the burned area, look for the river. Follow it downstream until you find settlements." "No." Anna clutched at his arm, panic in her voice. "I won't leave you. We're family now. Which is why I must protect you." Chaska insisted gently. "The journal must reach safety. Too many lives depend on it." Anna's chin trembled, but she squared her small shoulders with determination that reminded Chaska forcefully of standing deer. I'll hide, she agreed reluctantly. But you have to promise to come back for me. I promise, Chaska said solemnly, knowing it was a vow he might not be able to keep, but needing to give her hope. He reached into the pouch at his belt and withdrew a small carved wooden fox worn smooth from years of handling. Take this. Standing Deer gave it to me when she saved my life, said it would protect me from harm. Now it will protect you. Anna accepted the carving, reverently closing her fingers around it, as if it contained actual magic rather than symbolic strength. I'll wait for you, she whispered. Until tomorrow night. Chaska helped her squeeze into the narrow fissure which opened slightly once past the initial constriction. It wasn't comfortable, but it would conceal her completely from anyone not specifically searching for such a hiding spot. Stay silent no matter what you hear, he instructed. Use the willow bark if your fever rises again. Conserve your water. He hesitated, then added softly, You are brave and strong, little fox. Standing Deer would be proud. The new name, a Lakota, naming that acknowledged both her cunning and her connection to the carved talisman, brought a fleeting smile to Anna's pale face. Then she was gone, swallowed by the shadows of her hiding place, only the faint gleam of her eyes visible in the darkness. Chaska straightened, turning to face the direction from which Cain's voice had come. He moved deliberately away from Anna's hiding place, making enough noise to ensure the bounty hunter would follow him rather than search the area more thoroughly. Here I am, Cain, he called, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. Come and take your revenge if you can. A shot rang out immediately, the bullet ricocheting off stone inches from Chaska's head. He ducked into a side passage, moving deeper into the labyrinth of the badlands. Behind him, he could hear Cain's distinctive uneven gait, the thump of the wooden leg alternating with the normal footfall, and the man's labored breathing as he pursued his quarry up the steep, twisting path. Up, where's the girl, Injun? Cain shouted, pausing to fire again. This shot came closer, stone fragments stinging Chaska's cheek where they struck. Dakota Devil pays extra for her alive, but dead will do if you force my hand. Chaska didn't respond, conserving his breath as he climbed higher into the maze of stone. His wounded arm throbbed with each movement the dog bites, sending lances of pain through his entire body. Blood loss and exertion were taking their toll. He wouldn't be able to maintain this pace much longer. Behind him, Cain continued his relentless pursuit, driven by years of hatred and the promise of rich reward. The bounty hunter was hampered by his wooden leg on the uneven terrain, but what he lacked in speed, he made up for in determination and familiarity with the landscape. This was clearly not his first hunt through the badlands. The path narrowed suddenly, forcing Chaska to edge sideways along a cliff face with a sheer drop of 50 feet to his left. Loose shale shifted treacherously beneath his feet, sending small cascades of stone into the darkness below. One misstep would mean certain death. Yet Cain followed without hesitation, his breathing now a ragged snarl of effort and anticipation. I had nowhere left to run. Red Hawk. The bounty hunter called, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space. You're bleeding out, I can smell it. Just like I could smell your fear that day in the Cheyenne village. The taunt struck its intended target. Chaska had not been afraid that day. He had been sickened by the slaughter of women and children, by the casual cruelty of cavalry soldiers who fired into teepees without checking who was inside. His shot that took Cain's leg had been deliberate justice for a young mother cut down as she fled with her infant. I remember every detail of that day. Chaska replied, his voice steady despite his failing strength. How you laughed when the children screamed. How you counted coup on the bodies of elders who couldn't run fast enough. And I remember the look on your face when my men torched your village 2 moons later. Cain retorted. Oh yes, Red Hawk. I made certain inquiries after our first meeting. Made it my business to know everything about the warrior who cost me my leg. I was there when your woman and child died in the flames." A cold rage filled Chaska at these words. His wife Whistling Bird and their infant son had perished in a cavalry raid 2 years ago, a loss that had nearly destroyed him, driving him into the solitude of the scout's path rather than remaining with his diminished band. The knowledge that Cain had been involved in their deaths crystallized his determination. Whatever happened this night, the bounty hunter would not leave the Badlands alive. The narrow path ended abruptly in a small plateau perhaps 30 feet across, ringed with sheer drops on 3 sides. It was a dead end, or a perfect trap depending on one's perspective. Chaska moved to the center of the open space, turning to face the path by which they had ascended. His knife gleamed in the moonlight, held ready despite the weakness that threatened to overwhelm him. Cain emerged from the narrow path moments later, his face twisted in a grimace of effort and anticipation. The former cavalry sergeant was still an imposing figure, despite his disability, broad-shouldered and powerful with the hard eyes of a man who killed without remorse. He carried a Colt revolver in his right hand, a Bowie knife in his left, weapons that had claimed countless lives on the frontier. "End of the trail, Injun," Cain said, leveling the pistol at Chaska's chest. "Where's the girl?" "Safe from you," Chaska replied simply. "As my family should have been." Cain's thin lips curved in a mocking smile. "Family, is that what this is about? The half-breed is yours." He laughed harshly. "Makes sense now. Dakota Devil will be interested to learn the famous Red Hawk has been breeding with white women. She is my cousin's child." Chaska corrected, his voice cold with controlled fury. "Standing Deer was my father's sister." Something flickered in Cain's eyes, recognition perhaps, or calculation. "The healer woman. That explains much." He shrugged, the gesture dismissive. "No matter. Blood is blood, and Dakota Devil pays by the head, not the relation. Now why does he want her dead?" Chaska asked, stalling for time as he assessed his options. The plateau offered no cover, no advantage except the certainty that only one of them would leave it alive. "Not just her," Cain replied, seemingly willing to indulge his prey before the kill. "All the half-breeds. They complicate his business potential claimants to land he wants to control." He gestured vaguely with his knife. "The journal she carries makes her particularly valuable. Standing Deer's record of her charitable activities contains information that could cost Dakota Devil a fortune in disputed claims." Chaska's eyes narrowed slightly. "How do you know what's in the journal?" Cain's smile widened. "Because I've been hunting Standing Deer for months, you fool. Got close 3 times before she slipped away. The old woman was clever, I'll give her that. But not clever enough in the end." His voice hardened. "Now where is the girl, tell me, and I'll make your death quick. She is beyond your reach." Chaska replied, shifting his stance slightly to maintain balance as a wave of weakness washed over him. "As you will be beyond anyone's reach when I send you to meet the spirits of those you've murdered." Cain's response was a bullet that grazed Chaska's shoulder, drawing a fresh line of blood. "That's one," the bounty hunter said calmly. "I have 5 more before I need to reload. Each one will come closer to vital organs unless you tell me where you've hidden her." Despite the pain and blood loss, Chaska felt a strange calm descend upon him. This confrontation had been inevitable from the moment Cain recognized him at the cemetery, perhaps from the moment their paths first crossed years ago in that burning Cheyenne village. Fate or the will of the spirits had brought them to this place for a final reckoning. "You should have killed me with the first shot," Chaska said softly, then launched himself forward in a desperate charge. Cain fired twice more in rapid succession, one bullet missing entirely. In his surprise, the other, striking Chaska's side with an impact that nearly drove him to his knees. Still, the warrior's momentum carried him forward, his knife aimed at Cain's throat with deadly precision. The bounty hunter barely deflected the thrust with his own blade, steel screeching against steel in the quiet night. They crashed together, Chaska's superior strength nearly overwhelming Cain despite his injuries. For a critical moment, they were locked in a lethal embrace, each striving to drive his knife into the other's flesh. "Die, you red bastard!" Cain snarled, his face contorted with hatred as he fought to bring his pistol to bear at point-blank range. Chaska headbutted him savagely, feeling the satisfying crunch of the bounty hunter's nose breaking under the impact. Cain howled in pain, and fury blood streaming down his face as he staggered backward. In that moment of imbalance, his wooden leg caught on the uneven ground, sending him lurching toward the edge of the plateau. Time seemed to slow as Cain teetered on the brink, his arms windmilling as he fought to regain his balance. His eyes locked with Chaska's in a moment of perfect understanding, the hunter become prey, the debt of blood about to be paid in full. Then he was gone, his scream echoing off the canyon walls as he plummeted into darkness. The sound cut off abruptly, followed by a distant thud and the clatter of dislodged stones, then silence. Chaska sank to his knees, strength finally deserting him as the adrenaline of combat faded. Blood soaked his side where Cain's bullet had found its mark, joining the steady flow from his dog-bitten arm and earlier wounds. Too much blood lost, he knew perhaps too much for even his strong constitution to replace. He turned his gaze to the eastern sky, where the first faint lightning heralded the coming dawn. The prairie fire had burned itself out sometime during the night, leaving a blackened wasteland that stretched to the horizon. Smoke still rose in lazy tendrils, catching the pre-dawn light in a haze of pink and gold that would have been beautiful under other circumstances. With effort, Chaska dragged himself to the shelter of a boulder, propping his back against it to keep himself upright. He would not die lying down like a sick old man in the lodges. If the spirits called him to join his ancestors this day, he would meet them sitting up as a warrior should. His thoughts turned to Anna, hidden in her crevice far below. She would wait until nightfall, as instructed, then emerge to find her way to the river and eventual safety. The child had proven herself resourceful and brave beyond her years. If anyone could survive alone on the harsh frontier, it would be Standing Deer's granddaughter. Still, the thought of her making that journey alone, fevered and hunted, filled him with profound regret. She was family, his last living blood relation, if his deductions were correct. To find such a connection, only to lose it again, seemed a particularly cruel joke of the spirits. As consciousness began to slip away from him, Chaska focused on the brightening eastern sky, determined that his last sight would be the coming of a new day. The pain in his side had faded to a dull throb, his body growing numb with blood loss and the night's chill. It would be easy to surrender now, to let the darkness take him to where Whistling Bird and their son waited in the spirit world. A small sound broke his reverie, the scuff of a foot on stone too light to be a man's step. Chaska turned his head with effort, certain he was hallucinating when Anna's small figure appeared at the edge of the plateau, silhouetted against the dawn sky. "You shouldn't have come," he managed, his voice barely audible even to his own ears. "I heard the shots." Anna replied, simply crossing the plateau with the light-footed grace that had allowed her to climb the treacherous path undetected. "I couldn't wait in the hiding place not knowing." She knelt beside him, her fevered eyes taking in his blood-soaked clothing with grave concern. "You're hurt bad?" "Yes," Chaska acknowledged, seeing no reason to shield her from the truth. Cain's bullet found its mark. "Where is he?" Anna asked, looking around warily. "Gone to meet his ancestors," Chaska replied. "Or more likely the spirits that punish those who shed innocent blood." Anna nodded, accepting this news without visible reaction, another indication of how the violent frontier had aged her beyond her years. She reached into her tattered dress pocket and withdrew a strip of cloth, part of her petticoat. Chaska realized that she had somehow dampened with precious water. With surprising gentleness, she began cleaning the wound in his side, her small hands moving with the confidence of one who had assisted in such tasks before. Grandmother taught me, she explained, seeing his questioning look. She said healing hands run in our blood. Our blood. The simple phrase carried profound meaning in light of their newly discovered relationship. Despite his pain and weakness, Chaska felt a surge of pride in this child, who bore the strength and wisdom of their shared lineage. The bullet passed through, Anna reported after examining both entry and exit wounds. That's good, grandmother always said. Your grandmother was wise in many things. Chaska agreed, wincing as she pressed the cloth firmly against the wound to slow the bleeding. But even her skills might not be enough here. I have lost much blood. You can't die, Anna said fiercely, her chin set in that familiar stubborn line. You promised to come back for me. You're my family, all I have left. The raw emotion in her voice reached something deep within Chaska, a spark of life and will that refused to be extinguished despite his injuries. Standing deer had not saved him years ago, only for him to die, now leaving her granddaughter alone in a hostile world. The journal, the network of safety she had built for mixed-blood children like Anna, all would be lost without someone to continue her work. Help me stand, he said suddenly, drawing on reserves of strength he hadn't known he possessed. We must reach water before the sun is high. Hope flared in Anna's eyes at his words. With strength surprising in one so young and ill, she helped him to his feet, supporting him when he swayed dangerously from weakness. Together, they began the slow, painful descent from the plateau. Each step a victory against the darkness that threatened to claim them both. The journey down from the badlands was a nightmare of pain and exhaustion that Chaska would later recall only in fragments, Anna's small hand guiding him when his vision blurred. The taste of bitter herbs she found growing in sheltered crevices that helped dull the pain. The endless shuffling steps across terrain that seemed designed to defeat human passage. By midday, they had reached the edge of the burned prairie, a blackened wasteland still radiating heat from the previous night's fire. No pursuit followed them. Cain's men, if they still searched, were likely far to the south, following false trails, or perhaps giving up the hunt entirely with their leader gone. Anna's fever had returned with renewed force during their descent, her skin burning to the touch, despite the cooling herbs she had gathered. She stumbled frequently, her small body finally reaching its limits after days of hardship. Yet she refused to stop her determination to reach water and safety for both of them, driving her forward step by painful step. They crossed the burned area shortly before sunset, the acrid smell of smoke clinging to their clothing and hair. Beyond lay unburned prairie, and in the distance, the silver ribbon of the river Chaska had mentioned their last hope for survival. Night had fallen by the time they reached the riverbank, both so exhausted they could barely stand. The Platte River flowed broad and steady before them, its waters reflecting the rising moon like a path of molten silver stretching to the horizon. We made it, Anna whispered, swaying on her feet as she gazed at the water with desperate longing. Yes, Chaska agreed, though he knew they had only reached another waypoint in their journey, not its end. The settlements he had mentioned might be miles downstream, and neither of them had strength left for significant travel. With the last of his energy, Chaska helped Anna down the steep bank to the water's edge, where she drank gratefully from cupped hands. He joined her, the cool water soothing his parched throat and momentarily reviving his failing strength. Now what? Anna asked when they had both drunk their fill, her voice small and uncertain for the first time since their journey began. Chaska scanned the riverbank, looking for any sign of shelter or human habitation. In the moonlight, he could make out a fallen cottonwood perhaps 50 yards downstream, its massive trunk creating a natural windbreak against the night breeze. We'll rest there, he decided, knowing they could go no further this night. In the morning, we'll follow the river. Settlements can't be far. They made their painful way to the fallen tree, each step an act of pure will. The massive trunk offered better shelter than Chaska had hoped, its upper branches still bearing leaves that would help conceal them from casual observation, its lower side creating a protected hollow where they could rest. With the last of his strength, Chaska gathered grasses and river reeds to create a crude but effective bed for Anna. The child was nearly unconscious now, her fever raging unchecked despite the herbs and cool river water. She collapsed onto the makeshift pallet, her eyes fluttering closed almost immediately. "Rest," Chaska murmured, settling beside her to provide what warmth his own fevered body could offer. "The spirits will watch over us tonight." As darkness claimed them both, Chaska's last conscious thought was of the strange path that had led him to this moment. From lone warrior to protector, from stranger to family, in the space of 2 days. Standing Deer's hand was visible in all of it, her careful planning extending beyond her own death to ensure her granddaughter's survival. The eagle's feather returns to the nest. He whispered into the darkness, finally understanding the message Anna had relayed in her delirium. Then consciousness slipped away, leaving them both vulnerable under the vast Dakota sky. Dawn broke with gentle fingers of light across the river, painting the water with streaks of gold and rose. Chaska woke to the sound of voices and splashing oars, unfamiliar sounds that triggered immediate alertness despite his weakened condition. A flatboat was making its way upstream, 4 men working the oars against the current, while a 5th stood in the bow, scanning the shoreline. They were perhaps 100 yards distant, but approaching steadily. Chaska's first instinct was to remain hidden. White men on the frontier were as likely to shoot a wounded Lakota warrior as help him. But Anna's condition had worsened dramatically overnight. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, her skin burning with fever that would kill her without proper care. There was no choice but to risk encounter. With enormous effort, Chaska dragged himself from beneath the fallen tree and stood upright, supporting himself against the trunk. He raised one arm in greeting, then nearly collapsed as the movement sent fresh waves of pain through his wounded side. "Naho there," called the man in the bow, having spotted Chaska's movement. "Someone on shore." The flatboat altered course immediately, angling toward their position with increased speed. As it drew closer, Chaska could make out details of its occupants, 4 rough-looking men who might have been rivermen or traders, and a 5th whose bearing and cleaner clothing suggested leadership or ownership. "Stay behind me," Chaska murmured to Anna, who had woken at the voices but was too weak to do more than lift her head. "Let me speak first." The flatboat ground against the shore 20 yards downstream from their position, its shallow draft allowing it to approach quite close to the bank. The well-dressed man jumped ashore with surprising agility for one his age, perhaps in his 50s, with gray threading his beard and a pair of spectacles perched on a nose that had clearly been broken at least once in his younger days. "Hold there," the man called, approaching cautiously with one hand near what Chaska assumed was a concealed weapon. "We mean no harm, if you mean none." His eyes narrowed as he took in Chaska's blood-soaked clothing and obvious injuries. "You're hurt. The child more so." Chaska replied, gesturing toward Anna's partially visible form beneath the tree. "She needs medicine. Fever." The man's caution visibly gave way to concern at the mention of a sick child. He approached more quickly now, bending to peer into the hollow where Anna lay. "Good Lord," he muttered, taking in her condition with experienced eyes. "How long has she been like this?" 3 days of fever," Chaska answered. "Before that, 3 days without proper food or water. We were hunted." The man's head snapped up at this. "Hunted by whom?" "Men who work for Thomas Dakota," Chaska said, watching carefully for the man's reaction to the name. A shadow crossed the stranger's face, his mouth tightening into a grim line. "Dakota devil," he said quietly. "What would his men want with a child and a—" He broke off, obviously reconsidering his choice of words. "With you, The child is mixed blood. Chaska explained, his strength fading rapidly now that help seemed at hand. Dakota sees such children as threats to his land claims, and He swayed dangerously, forced to grab the tree trunk for support. I have history with one of his hunters. The man studied him thoughtfully for a moment, and then seemed to come to a decision. My name is Samuel Thornton, he said, extending his hand in the white man's gesture of greeting. I run a trading post downriver at the junction with Elk Creek. Chaska accepted the handshake weakly. I am Chaska Red Hawk of the Oglala Lakota. He hesitated, then added, The child is Anna May Thornton. Samuel's eyes widened at the surname. Thornton, he repeated, looking back at Anna with new intensity. Related to Matthew Thornton by any chance? Her father, Chaska, confirmed, watching understanding dawn on the trader's face. Matthew was my brother. Samuel said, his voice thick with sudden emotion. I haven't seen him in 12 years, not since he headed north to stake his claim against my advice. He knelt beside Anna, gently brushing the matted hair from her fevered face. My brother's child. He murmured more to himself than to Chaska. Sarah will never believe it. The revelation struck Chaska with the force of physical impact. First, the discovery that Anna was his blood kin through standing deer, and now the child had surviving family on her father's side as well. It seemed the spirits were determined that Anna May Thornton would not face the world alone, despite the losses she had suffered. She needs help, Chaska said urgently, breaking Samuel's moment of contemplation. Medicine for the fever. Samuel nodded, his expression shifting from wonder to practical concern. Yes, of course. My wife Sarah is skilled with herbal remedies. We'll get you both downriver to the trading post. He turned and shouted orders to the men on the flatboat, who immediately began unloading supplies to make room for the unexpected passengers. As the rivermen prepared a space on the boat, Samuel returned his attention to Chaska. How did you come to be traveling with my niece? He asked, curiosity warring with gratitude in his tone. I found her at her grandmother's grave. Chaska replied simply. Standing deer saved my life once. I owed her a debt. He hesitated, then added, There is more to the story, but it should wait until the child is safe. Samuel accepted this with a nod. Fair enough. Let's get you both aboard. With the rivermen's help, Anna was carefully moved to the flatboat, her small form wrapped in clean blankets from Samuel's supplies. Chaska followed with assistance, his strength nearly gone, now that rescue seemed assured. As the boat pushed off from shore, heading downstream with the current's help, he allowed himself to relax slightly for the first time since finding Anna in the cemetery. How far to your trading post? He asked Samuel, who sat beside Anna, bathing her face with cool river water. About 3 hours with the current helping us. The trader replied. My wife will have medicines prepared by the time we arrive. She always seems to know when I'm bringing home strays in need of care. A small smile touched his bearded face. Though I've never brought her quite such precious cargo before. Chaska nodded, his eyelids growing heavy as exhaustion claimed him. He fought against the encroaching darkness, unwilling to surrender to unconsciousness until he was certain of Anna's safety. There is a journal, he managed, forcing the words past increasingly numb lips. Hidden in Anna's dress. It must be protected at all costs. Samuel's expression grew serious. I understand, he said quietly. Dakota Devil's interest in the child, I presume. Partly, Chaska acknowledged. The journal contains information that threatens his business name's maps safe routes for children like Anna. Standing deer's work, Samuel said, surprising Chaska with his knowledge. Her network for helping mixed-blood orphans. There were rumors. He trailed off, seeing Chaska's astonishment. The frontier holds few secrets from those who know how to listen, my friend. Rest now. The journal will be safe with us. Finally, allowing himself to surrender to the darkness that had hovered at the edges of his consciousness, Chaska closed his eyes. The gentle rocking of the boat, the rhythmic splash of the oars, and the knowledge that Anna was in caring hands combined to pull him down into healing sleep. His last conscious thought was of Standing Deer, her wisdom in creating not only a network to save children, but a path that would bring her granddaughter to the protection of both sides of her heritage. The eagle's feather had indeed returned to the nest exactly as the healer had planned. Consciousness returned to Chaska slowly, like a swimmer rising from deep water. First came awareness of sensation, soft bedding beneath him. Clean bandages wrapped around his wounds, the scent of healing herbs and wood smoke in the air. Then sound quiet footsteps, the murmur of distant voices, the homely creaking of a well-built wooden structure settling in the evening cool. When he finally opened his eyes, he found himself in a small, simply furnished room. Sunlight streamed through a single window, suggesting late afternoon of what day he couldn't be certain. He lay on a narrow bed, his wounds expertly treated and bandaged, dressed in clean cotton clothing rather than his blood-stained buckskins. A woman sat in a straight-backed chair near the foot of the bed, sewing by the natural light from the window. She was small but sturdy-looking, perhaps in her late 40s, with capable hands and kind eyes, currently focused on her needlework. Her brown hair, streaked with gray, was pulled back in a practical bun, and she wore a simple dress of blue calico with a white apron. Sensing his gaze, she looked up, a smile warming her face when she saw he was awake. "Welcome back," she said, setting aside her sewing. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd sleep another day away." "How long?" Chaska asked, his voice rough from disuse. "Over 3 days," the woman replied, rising to pour water from a pitcher into a cup. "You lost a great deal of blood, and infection had set in by the time Samuel brought you here." She helped him sit up slightly, supporting his back as she offered the water. "I'm Sarah Thornton, Samuel's wife." Chaska drank gratefully the cool water, soothing his parched throat. As strength and awareness returned, his thoughts immediately turned to Anna. The child, Sarah's expression softened with understanding. "She's recovering well. The fever broke yesterday morning, and she's been asking for you since she woke." A smile touched her lips. "She's a remarkable girl, strong-willed and brave beyond her years. Reminds me of her grandmother." Chaska looked at her sharply. "You knew Standing Deer." "We met several times over the years," Sarah confirmed, resuming her seat. "She would stop here when traveling between the Northern Territories and the Eastern settlements. Samuel didn't mention that connection to you. There has been little opportunity for extended conversation." Chaska replied dryly. Sarah laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to brighten the small room. "No, I suppose not." "Well, there will be time enough for that once you've regained your strength." She rose again, straightening her apron with a practiced gesture. "I should tell Samuel you're awake. And Anna, of course, though I may have trouble keeping her from rushing in here immediately." As Sarah reached the door, Chaska called after her, "The journal, is it safe?" She turned, her expression serious. "Yes. Anna showed it to Samuel yesterday. He understands its importance." She hesitated, then added softly, "Standing Deer's work was known to us, though we were never directly involved. Perhaps now that will change." Then she was gone, leaving Chaska alone with his thoughts. He used the solitude to take stock of his condition. The dog bites on his arm had been cleaned, and bandaged the wound in his side, similarly treated. His various smaller injuries, cuts, bruises, the bullet graze on his shoulder, had all been tended with obvious skill. The fever that had threatened during their flight was gone, leaving only weakness from blood loss and the beginning stages of healing. Whoever Sarah Thornton might be, she was clearly a healer of considerable ability. Perhaps not with Standing Deer's reputed gifts, but certainly with practical knowledge that had likely saved both his life and Anna's. His assessment was interrupted by the sound of running footsteps in the hallway outside, followed by the door bursting open to admit Anna. She looked transformed from the half-starved, fevered child he had last seen, conscious, her hair clean and neatly braided, her face filled out slightly from proper food, her eyes bright with health rather than fever. "You're awake," she exclaimed, rushing to his bedside with a lack of restraint that spoke volumes about her improving condition. "Aunt Sarah said you might sleep another day." Aunt Sarah underestimates Lakota healing abilities. Chaska replied with a small smile, genuinely pleased by the child's recovery. "You look well, little fox." Anna beamed at the use of the Lakota name he had given her. "I feel better." Aunt Sarah's medicines worked faster than grandmother's, but don't tell her I said so. She perched on the edge of his bed, studying him with critical eyes. "You still look awful, though." A deep chuckle from the doorway announced Samuel Thornton's arrival. "Honesty is apparently a family trait," he observed, entering the room with Sarah close behind. On both sides of her heritage. Chaska raised an eyebrow at this comment, but before he could respond, Anna spoke excitedly. "I told Uncle Samuel everything," she said. "About how you found me at grandmother's grave, and how we escaped the bounty hunters, and about the journal and—" She paused for breath, her words tumbling out in childish enthusiasm. "And about how we're family cousins through grandmother." "I see," Chaska said, glancing at Samuel to gauge his reaction to this revelation. The trader met his gaze steadily. "Anna has been quite thorough in filling the gaps in our knowledge," he said dryly. "Though I admit the connection between Standing Deer and your family was unexpected." "To me as well," Chaska acknowledged. "I knew my father had a sister who left our band before my birth, but her name was never spoken. It was considered shameful that she married outside the tribe." Samuel nodded, understanding. "Such prejudices exist on both sides, I'm afraid." Matthew faced similar censure for marrying Little Sparrow. His expression softened as he looked at Anna. "Though, looking at the result, I can't say either was wrong to follow their heart." Anna ducked her head at this indirect compliment, a flush coloring her cheeks. Sarah moved to stand behind her, placing gentle hands on the child's shoulders. "Anna has also told us about Dakota Devil's men and their pursuit," she said, her voice hardening slightly at the mention of the notorious land baron. "About this man Cain and his personal vendetta against you." Cain is no longer a concern," Chaska said, simply seeing no reason to shield them from the truth. "He fell to his death in the Badlands during our final confrontation." Samuel's expression showed neither approval nor condemnation. At this news, merely acceptance of frontier justice delivered. "His men will likely assume you both died in the prairie fire or the Badlands," he observed. "Which gives us time to consider our next steps carefully." "Next steps?" Chaska questioned. Samuel exchanged a glance with his wife, some unspoken communication passing between them, before he continued. "Standing Deer's journal contains information vital to many innocent lives, children caught between worlds through no fault of their own." He paused, choosing his words with evident care. "Sarah and I have discussed it at length. We believe her network must continue, must expand, in fact, given the increasing tensions along the frontier." "And you propose to take on this work?" Chaska asked, studying the trader's face for any sign of deception or hidden motive. "With your help," Samuel confirmed. "This trading post sits at a crossroads people pass through here, going in all directions. Information flows like the river outside. It would make an ideal way station for the network." He spread his hands in a gesture that encompassed the building around them. Sarah and I have room enough, and hearts large enough to shelter children in need." "Why would you take such a risk?" Chaska asked, needing to be certain of Samuel's motivations. Samuel's expression softened with a grief long carried but never fully resolved. "Because I failed my brother in life," he said quietly. "I couldn't save him or his wife. But perhaps I can honor his memory by helping his daughter and others like her." He paused, then added, "And because Sarah and I know the emptiness of a home without children's voices to fill it." Sarah squeezed her husband's shoulder in silent support, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "We lost our only son to scarlet fever 5 years ago," she explained softly. "Joseph would have been 12 this summer." Anna reached up to place her small hand over Sarah's larger one, an instinctive gesture of comfort that spoke volumes about the bond already forming between them. Chaska felt something shift within him, at the sight a recognition that Standing Deer's vision extended far beyond what any of them had initially understood. "I believe this is what grandmother wanted," Anna said suddenly, her young voice steady with conviction. "Why else would she make me memorize the poem to find you, Chaska? Why else would she make me promise to guard her rest until the right protector came?" She looked between the 3 adults, her expression wise beyond her years. "She knew you would find me, and that you would bring me here to family on both sides, out of the mouths of children." Sarah murmured, smiling through her tears. Samuel nodded agreement. "Standing Deer always did see further than most," he acknowledged. "But the question remains, what now? Dakota Devil won't stop hunting mixed-blood children just because one group escaped him. And the journal suggests there are many others still in danger. The network must continue," Chaska said firmly, his decision made. "Expanded, as you suggested, with this trading post as a central hub." He looked directly at Anna. "Your grandmother's legacy must not die with her. But you'll have to return to your people eventually." Anna said, her voice small with the fear of losing this newly discovered family connection. "Yes," Chaska acknowledged. "My band needs me especially now with tensions rising again." He reached out to touch her hand gently. "But I will return when I can, to help with the network and to see my family." The words still felt strange on his tongue, but right a recognition of bonds that transcended the artificial divisions of the frontier. "Family on both sides," Anna repeated, her expression brightening. "Grandmother would like that." "Indeed she would," Samuel agreed. "And speaking of family, Sarah and I have a proposition for you, Anna." He glanced at his wife, who nodded encouragement. "We would like you to stay here with us as our daughter in all but name. This trading post will be yours someday, if you wish it." Anna's eyes widened at this offer. "Really, you want me to stay?" "More than anything," Sarah assured her, smoothing a hand over the child's braided hair. "This place has been too quiet since Joseph left us. It needs a child's laughter again. But first," Samuel continued, "we think you should spend some time at the mission school at Clearwater Creek. The Quakers there were already part of Standing Deer's network. They'll educate you and keep you safe, while Dakota Devil's attention is focused elsewhere." Anna considered this proposal with the serious deliberation Chaska had come to expect from her. "Will I learn reading and writing and mathematics?" she asked. "Things that will help me with the network later. All that and more," Samuel promised. "Including proper medical training if you're interested. Sarah believes you have your grandmother's healing gift." "I'd like that," Anna said, a genuine smile lighting her face for perhaps the first time since Chaska had met her. "And you'll visit?" she asked, turning to Chaska. "When I can," he promised. "And we will write letters through the trading post. That way we can share information about the network safely." This seemed to satisfy her. Anna nodded decisively, the matter settled in her mind, with the straightforward acceptance of childhood. "When do we leave for the mission?" "Not for a few weeks yet," Sarah replied. "You both need time to fully recover your strength. And there are preparations to make clothes to sew arrangements with the mission supplies to gather. And in the meantime," Samuel added, "we have a visitor you should meet. A man named Wallace who runs supply routes to most settlements and reservations in the territory. He arrived yesterday and has expressed interest in our expanded business ventures. Wallace has his own reasons for opposing Dakota Devil." Sarah explained, seeing Chaska's questioning look. "The man tried to burn him out 3 years ago when he wouldn't sell his contract routes. And he can help identify children in need and sometimes transport them as part of his regular deliveries," Samuel concluded. "He's waiting downstairs when you're ready to meet him." The conversation continued for some time, with Samuel outlining his preliminary thoughts on expanding Standing Deer's network while maintaining its secrecy. Sarah contributed practical considerations about supply lines, safe houses, and medical needs. Anna listened attentively occasionally, offering insights from her grandmother's teachings that surprised the adults with their wisdom and relevance. Throughout the discussion, Chaska felt a growing sense that he was witnessing something profound, not just the continuation of Standing Deer's work, but its evolution into something larger and more comprehensive than she might have imagined. The bridge between worlds that she had begun building would not collapse with her death, but would instead grow stronger, supported now by pillars on both sides of the divide. 2 weeks passed before Chaska was strong enough to consider travel. His wounds healed cleanly under Sarah's careful ministrations, and his strength returned more rapidly than even she had predicted. During this time, he remained mostly in the upper rooms of the trading post, avoiding the curious eyes of customers and travelers who might spread word of a Lakota warrior's presence in a white settlement. Anna divided her time between helping Sarah with household tasks and sitting with Chaska, serving as a bridge between his world and the new one in which he temporarily resided. She brought him news food and most valuably company that required no explanations or justifications. They spoke sometimes in English, sometimes in the Lakota phrases she remembered from her grandmother's teachings, a private language that reinforced their unique connection. In the evenings after the trading post closed to customers, Wallace would join them in Samuel's private office. The tall, lean man with iron-gray hair had proven to be an invaluable addition to their planning sessions, his extensive knowledge of the territory's hidden trails and unofficial crossings filling gaps in the information contained in Standing Deer's journal. Dakota Devil's men are still searching, but the story spreading along the river is that you both died in the prairie fire. Wallace reported one evening, his weathered face creased in a rare smile. Cain's body was found in the badlands yesterday by a hunting party. Official ruling is he fell while tracking renegade Indians, no mention of a girl or Standing Deer's journal. Good, Samuel said, making a note in the new journal he had begun keeping a master record of the expanded network they were creating. That gives us breathing room to get our plans in motion. What about Dakota Devil himself? Chaska asked. He will not accept Cain's failure easily. He's offering bounties for information about any Lakota seen south of the reservation boundaries, especially any traveling with white children. Wallace confirmed. But his attention is divided. The territorial governor is asking uncomfortable questions about his land acquisitions since that business with the Blackwood family claim. The law finally taking notice? Sarah asked skeptically. Wallace shrugged. Money talks louder than law out here, but even Dakota has enemies who'd like to see him fall. This network of Standing Deers apparently helped the wrong or right, depending on your perspective, child, a few months back. One with connections to the governor's wife's family. Samuel's eyebrows rose at this information. Interesting. That might explain why certain officials suddenly developed consciences. He turned to Chaska. Either way, Your return journey will be even more dangerous than we anticipated. Chaska nodded, absorbing this information. I must still go? My people need me, especially with winter approaching. He glanced at Anna, who had been unusually quiet during this discussion. But I will return when I can. The day of departure arrived clear and cool, perfect weather for traveling. Chaska stood in the small stable behind the trading post, saddling the horse Samuel had insisted on giving him. It was a sturdy paint gelding, not showy, but reliable and sure-footed traits far more valuable for the journey ahead than speed or beauty. As he tightened the cinch, he heard light footsteps approaching. Anna appeared in the stable doorway, dressed in a practical riding skirt and jacket, her hair braided and pinned up under a wide-brimmed hat. Going somewhere? Chaska asked, raising an eyebrow at her outfit. With you? Anna replied firmly. At least part of the way. Chaska shook his head. It's too dangerous. Dakota's men will be watching the trails. Uncle Samuel already agreed. Anna countered, stepping fully into the stable. He and Aunt Sarah think it would be good for me to visit the mission at Clearwater Creek before I stay there, to see the school and meet the teachers. Her chin lifted in the stubborn gesture Chaska had come to recognize. It's on your way north. The mission is still 3 days' ride, Chaska pointed out. 3 days during which we might be spotted together. 3 days during which I can show you which trails grandmother used. Anna replied. The ones not marked in the journal, because she kept them only in her memory and taught them to me. This gave Chaska pause. Standing Deer had been characteristically thorough in her written records. But it made sense that she would have kept certain critical information out of the journal information that could only be passed directly from guide to guide along the network. Before he could formulate a response, Samuel appeared behind Anna, carrying a small travel pack. She's as stubborn as her father was, he said, with a mixture of exasperation and pride. And she's right about knowing trails that aren't in the journal. Sarah and I have discussed it, and we believe this is the right course of action. The mission at Clearwater Creek is run by Quakers. Anna added, her expression earnest. Grandmother trusted them. They're part of the network, or they were. I can help you reconnect with them. Chaska looked from Anna to Samuel, and back again, recognizing when he was outnumbered. Very well, he conceded. But you follow my instructions without question while we travel. Safety must come before everything else. I promise, Anna agreed solemnly. Samuel handed the travel pack to Anna and then clasped Chaska's forearm in the gesture of respect they had established during their time together. Take care of each other, he said simply. And remember, you both have a home here when you need it. They set out within the hour, Chaska on the paint gelding Anna, riding a smaller mare that clearly knew and trusted her. They left the trading post by a back trail that Wallace had indicated would avoid the main roads where Dakota's informants might be watching. For 3 days, they traveled northwest along hidden paths that Anna remembered from journeys with her grandmother, trails so faint that even Chaska's experienced eyes would have missed them without her guidance. The child proved to be an excellent travel companion, maintaining a steady pace without complaint, despite the long hours in the saddle. On the evening before they were due to reach the mission, they made camp in a sheltered grove beside a small spring. As they sat by their fire after a simple meal, Anna suddenly reached into her pocket and withdrew an envelope. I wrote this for you, she said, offering it shyly. For after we say goodbye tomorrow. Chaska accepted the envelope with grave courtesy, touched by the gesture. Thank you, little fox. You can read it now if you want, Anna said, watching his face expectantly. Chaska carefully opened the envelope to find a folded piece of paper covered with neat, childish handwriting. The letter was short but heartfelt. Dear Cousin Chaska, thank you for saving my life and bringing me to Uncle Samuel and Aunt Sarah. Grandmother always told me I had family I hadn't met yet, but I didn't understand what she meant until now. I'm going to learn everything I can at the mission school so I can help with the network when I'm older. I promise to make you and grandmother proud. Please come back when you can. You're not just my protector anymore, you're my family. Your cousin, Anna May Thornton, Little Fox. Beneath the signature was a carefully drawn picture showing two figures, a tall man and a small girl standing together beside a grave. But unlike the grim reality of their first meeting in Anna's drawing, both figures were smiling, and a spectral third figure, clearly meant to be Standing Deer, stood behind them with her hands resting on their shoulders in blessing. Chaska studied the drawing, silently moved by the hope it represented, not just for Anna, but for all those caught in the brutal crossfire of a divided land. Grandmother always said the greatest journey begins with the courage to cross a single boundary. Anna commented, watching him fold the letter carefully and tuck it into his shirt. I think she meant people like us, people who belong to both worlds. Your grandmother was wiser than most. Chaska agreed. He reached into his pouch and withdrew the small wooden fox carving worn smooth from years of handling. This was her gift to me when she saved my life, he said, pressing it into Anna's palm. It seems right that it should return to her bloodline. Anna's fingers closed around the carving, her eyes bright with emotion. I'll keep it always, she promised. And remember everything, how you found me, how we escaped together, how we discovered we're family. Halvern, and I will remember a brave little fox who never surrendered despite impossible odds. Chaska replied, genuine affection warming his voice. Who honored her grandmother's memory by carrying forward her work of healing divisions. They sat in companionable silence as darkness settled fully around their camp, each contemplating the strange journey that had brought them together and the paths that would temporarily separate them tomorrow. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on their faces as the stars emerged in the vast Dakota sky. Do you think it will ever change? Anna asked suddenly. The hatred between whites and Indians. Chaska considered the question carefully before answering. Individual hearts can change, he said finally. Your parents proved that. Samuel and Sarah prove it. Standing Deer's network proves that many people, both white and Lakota, already reject the artificial boundaries others create. He paused, choosing his words with care. The world may not change in my lifetime. Perhaps not even in yours. But each child saved each family that learns to see beyond differences. These are victories worth fighting for. Anna nodded solemnly, wisdom beyond her years in her young face. That's what grandmother believed too. That's why she never gave up, even when both sides rejected her. And we will not give up either, Chaska promised. The medicine wheel turns. The work continues. The next morning, they arrived at Clearwater Creek Mission, just as the sun reached its zenith. The mission was a collection of sturdy wooden buildings surrounding a central structure that served as both church and schoolhouse. Children of various ages, some obviously full-blooded Native American, others mixed like Anna, still others appearing entirely white, played in a fenced yard under the watchful eye of a Quaker woman in her characteristic plain dress and bonnet. A quarter-mile from the mission, Chaska and Anna paused on a rise overlooking the peaceful scene. It was here they had agreed to part ways, Chaska continuing north to rejoin his people, while Anna began her new life at the mission school. Remember what Samuel said. Chaska instructed as they sat their horses side by side. Tell only Father Simon the full truth about the network. He was Standing Deer's most trusted contact at the mission. I remember, Anna assured him. And I'll be careful about what I write in my letters, nothing direct about the network, only the codes grandmother taught me. Chaska nodded approvingly. Despite her youth, Anna understood the need for discretion in their dangerous work. It was yet another sign of her suitability for the role that seemed increasingly to be her birthright continuation of the legacy Standing Deer had begun. Take care, little fox, he said softly. Grow strong and wise at the mission. I will see you again when the wheel turns back toward this place. I'll be waiting," Anna promised, straightening her spine and setting her shoulders with determination. "And I'll make you proud." "You already have," Chaska assured her. They embraced briefly, an awkward gesture on horseback, but heartfelt nonetheless. Then Anna turned her mare toward the mission and rode away without looking back, a final demonstration of the courage that had impressed Chaska from their first meeting. He watched until she was safely within the mission grounds, greeted by a tall man in the plain dark clothing of a Quaker minister. Only when Anna had disappeared into the main building did Chaska turn his horse northward toward the distant Lakota territories where his own people awaited his return. Standing Deer's journal rode securely in his saddlebags alongside Anna's letter, and drawing physical embodiments of the promise that now shaped his path forward. As he rode, Chaska reflected on the strange sequence of events that had led him to this moment. A chance encounter at a cemetery, a debt of honor, a desperate flight through fire and water, all culminating in the discovery of family he hadn't known existed, and a purpose that seemed to have been waiting for him all along. The sun was setting when Chaska made camp that evening, alone now, but carrying the weight of many connections, to Anna, to Samuel, and Sarah, to Wallace, and the others who would form the renewed network, and most profoundly to Standing Deer, whose vision had reached beyond her own death to create a future where bridges might span the bloody chasms between worlds at war. As darkness fell, he opened his journal, a new one Sarah had provided, and by the light of his small fire began to write. The first entry was brief, a simple dedication that captured the essence of what had changed within him during the past weeks. To Standing Deer, who saw beyond divisions, to Anna, who survived them, and to all the children who still wait between worlds. The medicine wheel turns, the work continues, and somewhere to the south, in a mission schoolroom, a small girl with mixed blood and uncommon courage began her own journeys, learning the skills that would one day make her a worthy successor to her grandmother's legacy. The eagle's feather had returned to the nest, and though separated by distance, the family bonds newly forged would not be broken again.